This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. We could all use more time. Amazon Business offers smart business buying solutions, so you can spend more time growing your business and less time doing the admin. I can see why they call it smart. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com.
Welcome to From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers. A podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career, and hosted by Work Defined. Join our AI co-hosts as they dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Let's get your career started.
You know that feeling. You spend ages finding what looks like, the perfect early career job.
Oh, yeah.
You tweak your resume, maybe even feel a little spark of excitement hitting apply, and then just silence.
Mm-hmm. Crickets.
Weeks go by, maybe months, and you're just left wondering, what happened? I mean, you felt qualified, right? You were eager, but the silence is just, it's really frustrating.
That frustration is so common, especially when you're just starting out. And often the reason isn't actually a human recruiter consciously overlooking your application.
Really?
Yeah, there's often this unseen step, a kind of initial filter. The applicant tracking system, or ATS.
Right? It sounds a bit like something from a spy movie.
Maybe a little, but really it's just software.
Yeah.
And it's used by a huge number of employers, particularly the bigger companies.
The ones that usually have lots of those entry-level roles we're looking for.
Exactly. It started out simply as a way to manage the sheer volume of applications coming in, like a digital filing cabinet, basically.
Okay, just organizing things.
Right. But the ATS of today, it's much more sophisticated. It's gone from just being a passive organizer to an active, evaluator.
Evaluator. So it's not just storing my resume.
Nope. It's actually reading it, or trying to, and comparing it to what the employer says they're looking for in the job description. Many modern ATS platforms use things like, AI, artificial intelligence, to try and figure out how good a match you are.
Wow. So it's not enough just to submit the application. You've somehow got to get past this digital gatekeeper first.
That's the challenge. We're talking about systems like Workday Recruiting, iCIMS Talent Cloud, Oracle Taleo, SAP SuccessFactors, Greenhouse, SmartRecruiters. There are quite a few big ones.
As someone applying, you probably have no idea which system that particular company is even using, right?
Usually not, no. And that's a really key point for anyone in the early stages of their career. If you're aiming for those bigger, well-known organizations, the chances are very, very high that an ATS is going to be the first, not eyes, but algorithms, to look at your application.
Okay, so that's what we're really digging into today, then.
Exactly. We want to shed some light on maybe why you're experiencing that silence after you hit submit, and maybe more importantly, what you can actually do about it, focusing specifically on how this ATS stuff plays out in your early career job search.
All right, so this invisible interview, as you called it, what actually happens? I send off my resume into the online void. What's going on behind the scenes?
Well, almost instantly, the ATS starts processing your resume. It parses it, which is like digitally dissecting it.
Okay.
To pull out the important bits.
Yeah.
Your job titles from past roles, even internships or part-time stuff.
Right, that all counts.
Definitely. The names of companies you worked for, your education, the skills you've listed, any certifications you might have. Then it takes all that data and compares it, often very directly, to the requirements and, critically, the keywords used in that specific job description.
Okay. So it's kind of like a digital game of spot the difference between my resume and their posting. What's it looking for to decide if I'm a good fit?
Well, some of the more basic systems rely pretty heavily on just straightforward keyword matching.
Like literally word for word.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Searching for the exact words and phrases from the job description right there in your resume. More advanced ATS platforms, though, they use something called natural language processing.
NLP, right.
Yeah, which tries to understand the meaning behind your experience, not just looking for exact word matches. And some even use machine learning.
Okay. Getting fancy now.
Kind of. It learns over time what kinds of skills and keywords tend to show up in people who get hired for similar jobs. And based on all that analysis, the system assigns a score to your application.
A score? Seriously, it's like my whole work history gets boiled down to a number that I don't even get to see.
That's the kicker. You, the applicant, you have zero insight into the score. But the recruiters, They see it.
Okay.
When they log into the ATS, they often see a list of candidates, and they're ranked by these scores, sometimes grouped into tiers, like, Tier 1 for the top scores, Tier 2, Tier 3.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little scary. If a recruiter's got, say, hundreds of applications for an entry-level job.
Which happens all the time.
Right. What's stopping them from just saying, okay, I'm only looking at Tier 1?
Unfortunately, that's exactly what often happens, especially for those high-volume roles. Recruiters might realistically only have the time, the bandwidth, to review the candidates the system has already flagged as the most promising, those in that top tier.
Wow.
The sheer number of applications can make it almost impossible to thoroughly look at every single resume, especially the ones the system has already pushed down the list.
Which brings us right back to that silence. We apply, feeling hopeful, and then nothing.
What does it really take to lead with impact in today's ever-evolving world? Welcome to Inside the C-Suite, the podcast where influence, energy, innovation, and empathy converge. Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host. Join me as I sit down with the boldest voices in leadership, visionaries who are not just making decisions, but making a difference. In every episode, we explore the heart of leadership. How do high-performing leaders harness their energy? How do they lead with empathy without losing their edge? How do they turn disruption into innovation and pressure into purpose? You'll hear unfiltered stories of adversity, resilience, and the raw moments that shaped true influence. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence, passion, and the energetic exchange that fuels transformation. Inside the C-Suite is your invitation to lead from a deeper place with intention, connection, and courage. If you're ready to go beyond the surface and unlock what really moves leaders to action, hit subscribe and step inside. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix. Inside the C-Suite, well, we're an energetic exchange. Let's lead with influence, live with energy, and create with empathy.
So is that lack of response basically a rejection, even if I don't get an email saying no thanks?
Well, the ATS itself usually doesn't send out a personalized rejection email just based on that initial score. It just sort of leaves your application sitting in those lower ranks.
Stuck in limbo, pretty much. But in a practical sense, if your resume never even gets seen by a human recruiter because the system scored it too low, then yes, absolutely, it functions as a rejection. You've been effectively filtered out by an algorithm.
So at this stage, it's not like we failed an interview question or anything.
Not at all.
We might not have even made it to the point where a person actually looks at our qualifications. So what's the difference between this kind of silent dismissal and a more direct rejection?
Good question. The more direct rejections often come from something called knockout questions.
Knockout questions, like in boxing.
Sort of. They're usually very straightforward yes or no questions right at the start of the application. Things like, are you legally authorized to work in this country? Or do you meet the minimum requirement of having a bachelor's degree for this role?
The basic check boxes.
Exactly. If you answer no to one of those mandatory knockout questions, the system might just automatically disqualify you right there. Sometimes it even triggers an automated rejection email almost immediately. That's an explicit rejection based on clear, non-negotiable stuff.
Okay, I get that. But you're saying for a lot of us early career folks hearing silence, it's probably not because we failed one of those checks.
That's right. It's more likely about that initial low ranking we were just talking about.
So we didn't get knocked out, we just didn't score high enough.
Precisely. Most entry-level candidates who meet the basic criteria aren't being rejected because they failed a direct question. They're actively being filtered out because their resume didn't score high enough in the APS to even warrant a human review.
So the recruiter might not even know I applied.
They might genuinely have no idea your application is even in the system because it's buried way down the ranked list. They just never get to it.
And then, maybe weeks or months later, after the job is filled by someone who did get through the ATS, then I might get that generic email. We've decided to move forward with other candidates, even if nobody ever actually read my application.
That's a really critical point to understand. That standard rejection email.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't tell you that your application might have been completely overlooked purely because of its ATS rank.
Wow.
So yeah, to reiterate, if the ATS ranking effectively prevents your application from ever being seen by a human, then for all practical purposes, the ATS has rejected you.
That's kind of a sobering thought, especially when you're just starting out. You could be genuinely qualified, really enthusiastic, but if your resume doesn't tick the right boxes for the algorithm,
it's like you never even applied, in a way.
It's not necessarily about your actual abilities, right? It could just be you missed some keywords, or maybe the formatting on your resume confused the system.
Absolutely. It could be something as simple as that. And this is where that lawsuit, the Mobley v. Workday case, becomes really interesting. It highlights some potentially big issues with these automated hiring systems.
Okay, let's talk about that. Mobley v. Workday. What's the main argument there?
So Derek Mobley, the person who filed this suit, he applied to a lot of jobs, hundreds, apparently through platforms using Workday's ATS. And he claims his applications were rejected again and again, not by people, but by the Workday system itself. He alleges his applications were basically screened out by the software and never even got passed along to a human recruiter for review. His core legal argument is that by scoring and ranking candidates in a way that effectively decides who gets seen, Workday's ATS is acting like, well, like an employment agency or a staffing company.
That's a really interesting angle. Why is calling it a staffing company so important legally?
Because staffing companies have clear legal obligations under anti-discrimination laws.
Right, like Title VII and others?
Exactly. If a staffing firm consistently filtered out candidates based on protected characteristics, race, gender, age, disability, even if it wasn't intentional, just baked into their process, that would be illegal discrimination.
So Mobley's saying if the ATS does the same kind of filtering and it leads to biased outcomes, then it should be held to similar standards. The argument is that if these ATS platforms are performing this crucial filtering function, and if that function leads to disproportionate outcomes for certain groups, meaning some groups get screened out way more often than others, then they should potentially be liable under those same anti-discrimination laws.
So it's not just about whether the ATS is efficient. It's about fairness. It's about the potential for these systems, even unintentionally, to create discriminatory hiring patterns based on how their algorithms work.
Precisely. Mobley's legal team is really focusing on this idea of functional rejection.
Functional rejection meaning?
Meaning, even if Workday doesn't send you an email saying you failed a knockout question, if its scoring system inherently prevents your resume from ever reaching a human reviewer, that functions as a rejection.
Gotcha.
And if the way that scoring system is built happens to lead to, say, racially disparate outcomes in who gets seen and who doesn't, then that raises serious civil rights concerns. Makes sense. And what's Workday's response been?
Well, Workday strongly denies any wrongdoing. Their position is essentially that their ATS is just a tool.
A tool employers choose to use.
Right. They argue that employers use it as part of their hiring process, but the ultimate decisions about who to interview and hire are made by the employers, the humans, not by the software itself.
But this lawsuit really challenges that idea, doesn't it? It suggests the ATS is actually playing a much bigger decision-making role right at the start.
It definitely does.
So what could happen if this lawsuit actually, gains traction or sets some kind of precedent? What are the bigger implications?
The potential ripple effects could be pretty significant, actually. If courts start to agree that ATS vendors can be held liable for discriminatory outcomes tied to their algorithms, well, that could force a major rethink of how these systems are designed and used.
You mean changes to the software itself?
Could be. Or changes in how employers are allowed to use it. It might also lead to much more pressure for transparency about how these scoring algorithms actually work.
Right.
Right now, they're often total black boxes, proprietary secrets.
Yeah, you never know why you got the score you did.
Exactly. Greater transparency could be a major outcome.
Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Okay, wow. This is a lot to take in, especially if you're just trying to land your first real job or move on to the next step in your early career.
It absolutely is.
You're focused on your skills, your experience writing cover letters, and now you're hearing about invisible AI gatekeepers and potential legal battles over algorithmic fairness. It can feel pretty overwhelming.
I totally get that. It can seem daunting.
So what can we actually do with this information? What are the practical steps for early career job seekers trying to navigate this ATS landscape?
Okay. Deep breath. While it might seem like another hurdle, understanding how these systems generally work actually gives you back some control, some agency. The key is really to try and optimize your resume to be as ATS-friendly as possible.
Okay, how do we do that?
It starts with tailoring. You really need to tailor your resume for each specific job you apply for. Don't just send the same generic one everywhere.
Use the keywords.
Yes, use the exact same language, the same phrases, the same keywords that the employer uses in their job description when you're describing your relevant skills and experience.
So less about being creative with my wording and more about just mirroring what they wrote.
For the ATS part, precisely. List your relevant skills, any certifications you have, the titles of your previous jobs or internships. Use language that directly matches what's in that posting. That's crucial for keyword matching.
Okay, Taylor, use keywords. What else?
Formatting matters too. It's generally best to avoid really elaborate formatting.
Like fancy fonts or columns.
Yes, stay away from complex graphics, tables embedded in the text. Columns sometimes confuse parsers, weird fonts, anything too non-standard that might just confuse the software trying to read or parse your resume.
So keep it clean and simple.
Clean, straightforward, easily readable format is usually the safest bet. Think standard fonts, clear sections with standard headings like work experience, education, skills.
Makes sense. And beyond just tweaking the resume document itself, are there other strategies we should think about?
Absolutely. This is really important. Don't only rely on clicking apply online through job boards.
Okay.
Whenever you possibly can, try to network. Seek out referrals. If you know someone, anyone who works at a company you're interested in,
Reach out.
Reach out. Let them know you've applied. Ask if they might be willing to give your application a little flag internally, or pass your name along to the hiring manager. That human connection can sometimes bypass the ATS filter entirely, or at least significantly increase the chances of a human actually looking at your resume, regardless of its initial score.
Ah, the power of networking still counts.
Counts more than ever in the age of ATS, I think.
So it sounds like doing the stuff tailoring, keywords, simple formatting, networking, it can definitely boost your chances of getting noticed. But it's not like a magic bullet, right?
No, that's a really realistic way to look at it. Optimizing your resume for the ATS won't guarantee you get an interview for every single job, but it will significantly increase the likelihood that you make it past that initial automated screening.
Getting it in front of human eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Getting your information in front of a real person where your broader qualifications, your enthusiasm, your potential can actually be seen and considered. Because ultimately, if the ATS doesn't give your resume a good enough initial rank, well, the person who could actually offer you that great early career opportunity might never even know you were in the running.
Right. So just to kind of wrap this up for everyone listening, especially those in the early stages of their careers, it's super clear that these applicant tracking systems, these APS things, are playing a really significant and often totally unseen role in how your initial job applications are handled.
Yeah, they're not just passive databases anymore. Yeah. They are actively filtering, ranking, and essentially acting as that very first level of decision-making in the hiring pipeline for many, many companies.
So understanding at least the basics of how they work isn't just like interesting trivia anymore.
No, it's becoming a really crucial skill, I think, for anyone navigating the job market today, especially early on. By adapting how you apply, focusing on that clarity and using the right keywords in your resume, and definitely not forgetting to network, you can seriously increase your chances of your application actually being seen by a human being.
Okay, so here's something to think about as you keep looking for those early career roles. Beyond the specific skills listed on the job ad, what other kind of invisible rules might be affecting things in those first application stages? And maybe more importantly, how can you be proactive, learn about these systems, and navigate them to give yourself the absolute best shot at landing that next exciting step in your career journey? Definitely something worth mulling over.
This has been From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. Each episode, we dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Subscribe to this podcast for free now, so you don't miss an episode, and visit www.collegerecruiter.com to find your next great job.
You know the words dominating today's headlines.
Private equity,
generative capital gains tax,
America's
chip war by market volatility,
on
Fed rate cuts.
But do you understand how they impact your world and your wallet? In a world that skims the what, understand the why. Because context changes everything. Subscribe at Bloomberg.com.